So the newest endgame mode just came out and it goes by the name of Stygian Onslaught. Because this is the first time that this has came out, let us go over the basics. So essentially it is a boss rush game mode with 6 difficulty levels, being difficulty 1 to 6 from normal, advancing, hard, menacing, fearless, and finally, dire. After you do the quest or while you do the quest, you have to start off with clearing the hard difficulty before accessing the following difficulties like menacing into fearless, and completing fearless will give you access to dire. Now, this is what the difficulties are equivalent of from my experience. Difficulty 1 in normal is relatively easy, in fact they're just level 40. Advancing is basically the same scaling as floor 9, if not I think weaker because Spiral Abyss has additional HP scaling. Difficulty 3 aka hard is approximately about floor 10 chamber 3 or about floor 11 worth of Abyss scaling, and this is what I would consider to be the casual breakpoint. Then we move on to the harder parts with difficulty 4 at menacing, which is equivalent to floor 12 and chamber 3 scaling. So this is mostly made for people who can comfortably get 36 stars with well invested accounts. And now for the challenging part, we start off with difficulty 5, which is fearless. The scaling is roughly about floor 12 with chamber 3 at minimum. However, in terms of what you require in order to clear this, you do need super well invested accounts on top of meta units and preferably maybe a few refinement ones of the 5-star signature weapons here and there. And lastly, we do have difficulty 6 being dire. The level recommended in order to clear this usually about C2 R1. I would consider this to be the rough dolphin to whale territory, where you want to get C2 R1 of any meta 5-star character with their weapon at the very minimum, preferably a few units of the DPS if not all units. Or you can try to do this really hard, but you need at minimum C0 R1 with the absolute min-maxing everything that you have, ideally with the signature weapon and some other 5-star weapons on your team. Exalted Dire, you have to clear all of the bosses within 180 seconds in order to gain the reward, or about 3 minutes. So for the first 3 difficulties is where all the Primo Gems are. You can co-op with all your fellow friends, although I'm not too sure whether you can gain the rewards or not. And then you can use the same characters or teams for the first 3 difficulties. Difficulty 4 onwards at Menacing will require unique characters, so you cannot repeat the same units against individual bosses. The Primo Gems can only be obtained from doing up to the hard mode, so you don't really have to try so hard to go for Menacing difficulty and above. For the 2 last difficulties, Menacing and Fearless will grant you 1 dust each, thus locked behind these respective game modes. And of course, time-limited skins for the 4-star and 5-star weapons are locked behind the Dire difficulty respectively. Dire Commendation is a unique event or thing that is only available for the first 10 days after the mode resets. Every 120 resin spend will grant you an additional 5-star artifact, and the 3rd and final dust is locked behind spending 1200 resin on this way, which is approximately about 6.67 days or roughly 6 days worth of resin plus another 120. So if you haven't spent your resin on this, I recommend dropping all plans right now, farm for that resin in order to get the dust if that is something that you're interested in doing. Now as for the bosses, the lineup this time around for version 5.7 are the Hydro Tulpa, the Lava Dragon statue, as well as the Circuit Source Automaton, the Overseer device. Now before we get into the guide part, I'm going to split the guide roughly into 2 sections. Essentially, I'm going to go through all of the bosses. I'll make 1 strategy for Menacing and 1 strategy for Fearless. Now generally, all the bosses in the Menacing difficulty, or the 4th one, is basically just the Spiral Abyss veteran variant, so there's no real special mechanics, so just keep that in mind, because at difficulty 5 at Fearless, the Hydro Tulpa and the Overseer device does have a unique kind of mechanic going on that does separate them between the Menacing difficulty. Now let's get started with the Hydro Tulpa. Hydro Tulpa is permanently Hydro infused, but also immune to Hydro, but it also means you gain access to Vaporize. All his attacks do quite decent amount of damage and does have a decent AoE, so do be careful if you're running Bennett Burst because the Pyro application on you can lead you to getting one-shotted. His general mechanic is that he summons a half Tulpa every now and again, and if you break this guy with enough elemental application or the right elements, you can prevent the Tulpa from absorbing it and getting bigger. If the Hydro Tulpa successfully absorbs the Mini Tulpa, it will become bigger, have a bigger hitbox, but he will also do more damage with bigger AoE for his attacks. He also gains about 45% additional resistance during this state, so ideally you do not want him to get through with the absorption. Now, starting off with the strategy for Menacing, you can kill the mini Tulpas while the big Hydro Tulpa is attacking, because if you try to go for the mini Tulpas and you're quite far away from the big guy, he will try to teleport to you. So if you have the leeway to do so and you want to prevent him from moving too far or standing still, try to hit the mini Tulpa while he's in the middle of doing an attack. Of course, Cryo and Dendro are the best elements for instantly breaking the Tulpas. This tip is generally for circle impact teams or whatnot, but it is nice to ensure that he doesn't actually move around a lot, because when there are no Tulpas, he will generally stay at the center. Now, of course, for both sides, Pyro units are going to be the best to bring here, since you do get free Vaporize and the damage amplification is extremely helpful for the DPS check. Now, for my personal experience, it is possible for you to run a Hyperbloom team with double Electro here. On the plus side, you don't actually have to bring Xingqiu or a Hydro unit, because he is permanently Hydro infused, so you can probably run like a double Denful for your clears. Of course, Vaporize is your absolute best chance here. Vaporize Melt or Vape Melt as they call it is going to be really helpful here, because the unique thing about the Tulpa is like this. So not only does the boss gain more HP, the Tulpas will actually increase their Hydro Shield, or the mini Tulpas will have 12 units of Hydro Shield. On top of that, they will have about 12% of the boss's HP. Now, granted that the big Hydro Tulpa has 7.6 million HP, that means the little guy will have 920,000 HP. So if you don't have the right elements, you could just try to brute force it with whatever vape teams you have. Now, the unique thing about this Tulpa too is two things aside from that. One is that around the 1 minute and 10 or 1 minute and 25 mark, from my experience it's usually 1 minute and 10 remaining, he will create a white shield that is damage based for a certain period of time, charging up his ultimate move. This will reset all your ability cooldown and give you all your energy back and Fighting Spirit or Serpent Subtlety for Skirk. Breaking the shield in time will do some amount of damage to him and stagger him a bit, and failing from breaking the shield will result in your active character dying regardless of whether you try to iframe it with burst or not. So the funny thing about this whole mechanic is that things that are already on the field are actually unique, so this does allow funny shenanigans like Shangling having 2 Pyronados on the field. Now, this is a very unique but not really the most consistent strategy that I've found. It is possible to stagger him by only breaking 1 mini Tulpa, because from the attack pattern that I noticed from the video is he generally does about 2 to 3 attacks before he actually turns or absorbs or begins the absorption phase. And for whatever reason, usually there's only 2 Tulpas like on both sides, right? The mini Tulpas. But I think it's possible to somehow maybe bait him away a bit further from the other Tulpa. So it is possible for me to actually break 1 mini Tulpa, staggering him, thus cancelling the absorption phase overall. I will have the run showcase in a separate video later on doing my 4-star clear, so stick around for that. However, this thing is completely inconsistent. I don't really know the reason. I think the absorption has a distance limit. So if you want to try like a 4-star team, or you do want to try like a vape team, this strategy might be useful for you to keep in mind. And the second thing or strategy that I find to be useful is backpedaling. Because the Tulpa, similar to the Kongamato, only can attack once he registers that he is in front of you, you can basically go around it to just keep him from turning and turning again and again. This will basically stall his attacks and give you more time to actually put out your DPS. Now, in terms of the attack pattern that I've kind of tested right here, it seems to roughly be quite a similar pattern. It will start off with like 1 attack first. The second attack will be a sword slash or whatnot, and usually after the second attack he will summon 2 mini Tulpas on both sides, 1 on the left and 1 on the right. And then the third attack will usually be the thing where he kind of just dives on the ground and tries to run in quotation mark, and then generally it will stay at the center, and then the 4th hit he will try to absorb. I use this to my advantage in order to try to take advantage of the 1 Tulpa staggering mechanic, break him, staggering him, preventing him from basically gaining additional resistance and healing. And that's the one thing I forgot to mention, he does actually heal upon absorbing the Tulpa. So at the very least, if you can't break both Tulpas in time, breaking 1 would be quite significant so that he doesn't actually like heal as much as you should. And then afterwards, he does another 2 more attacks and reverts back to normal. And then the 7th attack will be the special move, which in this particular run has about 1 minute and 16 seconds remaining. And then afterwards, because there is a Tulpa, it immediately does an absorption and then does another 2 more attacks before it shrinks, and then just dash and do the same attacks again and again. And I think it does a special move at the last 6 seconds. This is based on the failed run. I think the successful run, which you should be seeing right now, is actually quite similar. So that's one thing you can definitely keep in mind. In terms of all the different teams I've tested, unfortunately, you do need incredibly cracked teams. And if you want to run a 4-star team, I will show you in a separate video later. But all the characters that I've tested is mostly Pyro DPS. I would say the 3 units that take advantage of this part is mostly Maoika, Alakino, and what's the last one again? I think it was Shengling is so far the 3 best pyro DPS you can bring. If you don't have either of these, then I don't think you should even try doing Fearless in the first place. And surprisingly, based on my results, the Maoika Melt team with a really good build, it barely cleared with like 117 seconds. I did try to do the double DPS team with Alakino and Maoika, and I failed once, so I had to go swap my artifacts a bit for Alakino from Whimsy to Gladiator. And of course, I had to put my Maoika on a Scrolls build from Gravestone all the way to the event Claymore the Male Flower. And this is my fastest clear by far, roughly 71 seconds. I think according to the in-game stats, Alakino did like 5.6 million of the damage, so you could say then yeah, it is pretty nice. Shiloni here is mostly for the red shred because you cannot trigger scrolls. And honestly, an instructor on Bennett in order to buff all the EM, and of course Maoika for scrolls to be able to buff Alakino. I also tested the Varesa Overloaded team, but I think it simply is not good enough, unfortunately. Maybe instead of bringing Maoika, bringing Shengling here might actually increase your chances of clearing it, so I don't know, I could be wrong. And of course, the successful team, the full build is here. Feel free to subscribe, I'll upload that video right after this one comes out. 102 seconds and surprisingly really good. Anyways, let's move on to the Lava Dragon statue. So the Lava Dragon statue is essentially a Pyro Shill boss. It will start off at the Geohuman rock form with extremely high resistance. In order to break this rock form, you need to apply a lots and lots of Pyro. Now in the Menacing version, the regular Abyss version, every Pyro hit will do about 1.7% of its Fury bar, which will take a total of 60 hits in order to bring it to the second phase. However, any sort of Pyro application will apply 6.67% Fury, which will total up to 15 Pyro application. So ideally, you want to bring units that can do lots of Pyro hits on top of applying Pyro really fast, and the only answer to that question is our resident Oppa Shengling. Once you fill the Fury bar to the second phase, it will enter the Lava Dragon state, where all of its resistance will be reduced except for Pyro. Now once it enters the lava form, 20% of its Fury bar will be filled by default. Now of course, you gotta just build the bar even further with even more Pyro. Each Pyro hit does about 0.83%, about 96 hits to max out, or every Pyro application will do about 3%, which leads to roughly 27 hits. Now, two things to keep in mind is that once a Fury bar reaches 50% and 100%, each instance will take 15% of its max HP as true damage. I would say most of the damage that you do for the Lava Dragon will be based on this mechanic alone, so you can use this to keep in mind in order to interrupt some of his attacks. Once the second bar is completely filled, it will basically be overburned out, it will lose the 30% HP and lots of its resistance including Pyro, and he will be stunned for about 10 to 15 seconds. Now this is for the menacing part, so let us jump to the Fearless strategy. So for Fearless, you absolutely need Burning and Overloaded. That is the most ideal team possible. The one thing I didn't mention in the previous part is that if you apply Cryo and Hydro, you will remove 20% of its Fury bar regardless of whether you have any application or not. So ideally, a lot of Cryo and Hydro DPS are not recommended here unless you are running Molani Vape or Molani in some sort of Burn Vape team. That's the only exception. So generally, the strategy is just to try to save your abilities in order to apply Pyro. So whenever it is like in the phase where it's returning back to the rock form, try to save all your Pyro abilities for later and unleash it once the bar appears on the screen. Of course, applying Dendro on top of the Burning Aura will count as refreshing the Burning Aura, thus burning up the bar even further, which is why units like Emily and Kinish is extremely good for this particular boss. Another alternate team you can do is of course Overloaded, and I'll go over the teams I tested later. And if you want to try Quick Load, which is Quicken plus Overloaded, that is kind of usable depending on your investment level. Now for all the few teams that I tested, the first and the best clear I've had by far is definitely with the Emily Kinish team. I'm glad that I actually built Kinish. So far we had Emily here with Calamity Queller, Yansan, Consolation 2 Scrolls, Shengling. I did have to give her Favonius and a Deepwood set instead of Emblem because it's clear that the Resistance Shred from the Deepwood memory set is very pivotal in buffing both Emily and Kinish's damage. This gave me about a 92-second clear, which is the fastest one by far. Now, all for the other accounts that I've tested, like I tested on a view account where we ran the Varesa Overloader team, but instead of running Maoika, we ran Shengling, we could clear in 112 seconds. Now, for the other teams that I tested, notably these two teams that you see right now are both the Navia Double Pyro team. In terms of the stats or the clear, both of them failed, but I would attribute it mostly to my Navia being underinvested. Granted that my Navia is like what, 65 crit with 160 crit, which granted that's not really the best possible build. She is doing like a decent amount of damage, but I reckon if you do have a 5-star weapon, Refinement 1 of the Verdict, or at the very least maybe a 220 to 240 CV Nighttime Whispers build, it should be very possible for you to clear this boss as long as you have Shilon and Bennett Shengling, which is mostly these few. Now, between Shengling and Maoika, I would highly recommend Shengling because it will actually help build the Fury bar much faster, so you will have a bit of time there. Now, as for Cloran Overloaded, I also tested that one. However, the downside is that I did have to swap my Cloran build from Haran to Finale of the Deep, clearing with about 115 seconds for the clear. My Cloran is okay, but it's still kind of work in progress. I do want to bring her to a 210 to 220 CV build, but that's going to be happening maybe next week. And then of course I tested my own Veresa in my own account. I cut it very close, barely cleared it when the timer was about to run out. And of course the one team I did try is the regular 4-star Overloaded team. It is very much possible, but you do need to build for the DPS build just like I did for the Hydro Tulpa part. I also tested Raiden Overloaded, but this one is mostly I do have Constellation 2 Raiden with about 240 to 250 CV build, cleared at about 111 seconds with a few bit of time remaining. And this team, I forgot to record it yesterday. I tried it based on one of my viewers sent over on the stream yesterday. I think the footage will be playing out right now. Emily, Faruzan, Bennett, Xiao. It is very much possible to do this, and because Emily is there, life just becomes much easier. I think it clears with like about 100 seconds or something like that, so that is pretty decent. And the last thing I tested was just Emily burning with Alucino. Granted, I had to swap Alucino to 4 Gladiator with Yansan and Fischl, and it could clear with 112 seconds. And these are probably the two bosses where you can kind of get away with running semi-budget teams. And then there's the last boss which we cannot really go budget at all. Now for the Secret Source Automaton, it's a cryo gimmick boss. You will have a 0 energy at first. It'll start off by summoning the 2 lasers and spin around. It does have the bar on top with 135 points. Every cryo hit you do will reduce the bar by 4, but he gains 5 per second. So ideally you do want to bring at least 2 cryo units in order to bring this down. And once you bring his point bar thing down all the way to 10 points, you will see like a cryo effect. He will enter the frozen flow state. His attacks will be disabled and it will lose a lot of resistance. However, it will have negative resistance to cryo. So this is very much a cryo only kind of boss, and you don't really have any other way around it. While there are other mechanics that I could talk about for the Fearless mode or for the Menacing mode, but this is mostly focused on Fearless. So here's a few things that I just kind of copy pasted from the previous Abyss guide. Now he does have the separate Counterstrike mode where it has a separate hidden bar with 180 points, and it is indicated by the motif phlogiston ring that is all around it. If a character enters a Knight's Blessing state, it will gain 30 points. Maintaining the state will give it 10 points per second. Once it reaches maximum points where you see the bar outside is super colorful and it's like all the way to the top, and his cryo bar at least has 10 points, he will enter this special Counter-Strike mode. Now I'm not too sure if this variant will have reduced resistance to 50%. I assume it's going to be roughly the same from the little things that I've tested. So yeah, you can technically somewhat take advantage of this, but if we were to go over the teams, it's not looking good. Honestly, I can't really have any real strategy. You can see all the teams that I tried here were basically 2 or 3 of the same unit. It's between Furina, Shenhe, Escoffier, or Yelan, and the only 3 DPS that I have is mostly my main is Ayaka at C0, Raisti, and then of course Gan Yu. In terms of the ones that succeeded, my Ayaka, I had to swap my Furina from Festering Desire to Pavonia's Sword simply because the energy was a problem. Also, I forgot to mention, if you actually trigger the Frozen Flow art, it will restore all your energy back. So at the very least, the first rotation, you don't have to worry about getting enough ER because bringing the bar below 10 points will grant you all your energy back. So my Ayaka, even with Furina on Pavonius, can barely clear with like a second or less than a second remaining, and it requires very, very precise rotation. And all the other teams I tried Raisti with the best possible build. I think my Raisti build should be on screen right now. It's with Skyward Atlas, it's probably my second best, so one of my better Maréchaussée builds. And to be completely frank with you, it is almost there, but not quite possible. It does require, I think, minimum Constellation 1 Raisti, preferably a 5-star weapon, and if not, having the cash flow supervision with his signature. And for the Skirk team, I tried it on one of my viewers' account yesterday. It definitely clears a bit more comfortably than the Ayaka team, but even then it cut quite close with about 9 seconds remaining. And the last real cryo DPS is probably just Ganyu. I don't recommend this. The boss roughly had about 15 to 20% HP remaining, and unfortunately Ganyu is just simply... Ganyu has kind of fallen off. To be honestly frank with you, if you don't even have any of these units between C1, R1 Risley, Ayaka with Purina Shenhe Escoffier, or Skirk with her premium team, I highly do not recommend you to try Fearless for this particular boss, because between the two other bosses, this one is probably the worst and the most gimmicky one. So yeah. Anyways, hopefully you guys find that tip useful. If you guys have cleared Fearless, not Menacing, you can share your teams for Menacing. That's perfectly fine. I would like to collect data to see what kind of teams you guys are running. But for those who managed to clear it on Fearless, what kind of teams are you guys running? Just feel free to share them down in the comment section below. I just want to see if there is anything unique that people have yet to try, or I have yet to try. Maybe we could add that and share that information with a lot of others in our community. Otherwise, I hope you guys found the Stygian Onslaught guide thing useful. And if you have anything else to say, leave them down in the comments below. If you find this video helpful or you enjoyed it, give that like button a little slap. Subscribe for more content. I will be uploading the 4-star overloaded clear on the Hydro Tulpa, maybe in a later section or literally after this. And maybe I'll try for the Lava Dragon statue for a 4-star only team. So feel free to stick around by hitting the subscribe button. And otherwise, that is it for the video, and I will see you guys next time. This is Ethereal, signing off, wishing you guys the best of luck in your future endeavor. Peace out, everyone.